بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ومولانا محمد وآله وصحبه وأزواجه وذريته أجمعين. اللهم ربنا أرنا الحق حقا وارزقنا اتباعه وأرنا الباطل باطلا وارزقنا اجتنابه. اللهم أرنا حقائق الأشياء كما هي ربنا زدنا علما وعملا وإخلاصا يا رب العالمين. اللهم انصر أولياءك في غزة، اللهم انصرهم على عدوك وعدوهم إنك على كل شيء قدير. اللهم فرج عنا وعن إخواننا في غزة، اللهم فرج عن أطفال غزة ونساء غزة ورجال غزة وشيوخ غزة وأهل غزة وأرض غزة. اللهم نفس كربنا وكربهم وثبت أقدامنا وأقدامهم والطف بنا وبهم يا أرحم الراحمين. وصل وسلم على سيدنا ومولانا محمد وآله وأصحابه وأزواجه وذريته أجمعين برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. آمين. Okay, we continue our reading of this article on definition of the state. And he had stopped here. Hegel also thinks that our deepest interest is in freedom. Sure. He is the disciple of Kant after all, and Rousseau. But for him, it can only be fully enjoyed when we live in a community. That's because it's conception of self, which the exercise we live when we live in a community in which the exercise of what freedom reflects, not simply. But for him, it can only be fully enjoyed when we live in a community which the exercise of the freedom reflects not simply the capacity of particular wills to secure their particular interests, but the exercise of an ethical life in which conflicts of interest are properly mediated and reconciled. We don't need to get into Hegel's ideas, but otherwise, yeah, but how are we going to understand this if we don't? I think, anyway, let's first read this. So Hegel also thinks that our deepest interest is in freedom, but for him it can only be fully enjoyed if we live in a community. It's not really true because, in which the exercise of the freedom reflects not simply the communal life was one step or one phase in the realization of freedom or realization of self. So in which the exercise of that freedom reflects not simply the capacity of particular wills to secure their particular interests, but the existence of an ethical life in which conflicts of interest are properly mediated and reconciled through capital. What is the conflict of interests after all, if you accept freedom as your basic value? That's the accumulation of capital. And that's what Marx realizes. The institution that achieves this is the state, which takes us out of the realm of particularity into the realm of concrete universality. By providing resources, I guess, a realm in which freedom is given full expression, because for the first time people are able to relate to one another as individuals. So, the difference between Kant and Hegel, for example, is for Hegel, individual freedom is realized within a context. And the individual wills are the expression of the will of the humanity at large. And individuals can't free themselves until the humanity free itself. So the freedom of humanity is expressed in community and state and all those things. This is possible because the state brings into existence something that eluded people in society before the state, in a form of ethical life, in which at last people can feel at home in the world. I mean, a state itself is an expression of humanity's freedom from externality, and not just negative freedom, but self-expression of humanity. Okay, maybe we will separately, in separate videos, we'll look at Hegel's conception of the state and Kant's, because if we keep going into deeper, we will never be able to finish this article. The most serious challenge to Hegel's view is that offered by Marx. The state might appear to be a structure within which conflicts of interest are overcome as governed by the universal class. Hegel's state bureaucracy acted to serve only the universal interest, but in reality the state did no more than masquerade the defender as the defender of the universal interest. So, and that's a good way of putting it, because Marx's disagreement with Hegel is not as to the ideal, but who is going to achieve that ideal. And the ideal is the same for Marx as well as for Hegel, the freedom of humanity as a species. And only then, and within that freedom, every individual will enjoy their freedom. And for Marx, the state bureaucracy or capitalist bureaucracy won't do that, because they are blinded by their self-interest as capitalist class, or as liberal, or as bureaucratic class. The class which will do this is the proletarian class. Okay, so that's the method, but the ideals are the same, and the states are important. The state is important for all of them. And despite disclaimer, liberalism, obviously, state is also very important as the defender of the capital, or the interest of the universal capital. So the state might appear to be the structure within which conflicts of interests were overcome as government by the universal class. The state might appear to be the structure within which conflicts of interest were overcome as government by the universal class acted to serve only the universal interest. But in reality, the state did no more than masquerade as the different. So, what are universal state? That's accumulation for the sake of accumulation, and they become this interest is distorted when it is done for the sake of a class or individuals or a group. That's Marx's argument. The very existence of the state. So, in a sense, Marx's critique of Hegel is at par with Hegel's critique of Kant. So one level up. So Marx is making the same critique against Hegel as Hegel made against. So it's a critique based, the critique of particularity in the name of universality. So the very existence of the state, Marx argued, was evidence that particularity had not been eliminated. And discrete interests remain in destructive competition with one another. So these are class interests or individual interests or group. More specifically, the conflict remained manifest in the class division. And society and the state could never amount to more than a vehicle for the interest of the ruling class. That's why the class which should rule in transition period is the class which is a universal class, which is a proletariat class. in Marx's view, because the interests of the proletariat class are the interests of everyone. Freedom would be achieved only when the state was fulfilled. But when it is superseded. But the state is superseded not directly, but through a transition, where you have a class state, but that class is a universal class. And this universal class overcomes scarcity, and then once scarcity is overcome, as Lenin shows in his State and Revolution, there is no need for state anymore. What is present in Marx but missing in previously criticized theories is a keen sense that the state might not so much serve as human interests in general, which for him is the interests of the capital in general, as serve particular interests that have managed to capture it for their own purpose. This is why for Marx, social transformation requires, first, the capture of the work by the working class of the apparatus of the state, because working class is the universalist class. The cause of human freedom would be served, however, only when the condition that made the state inevitable were overcome, that is scarcity, and the division of which brought with them alienation, competition, and class conflict. Okay, what is most persuasive in Marx's analysis is the account of the state as an institution that embodies conflict of the interests found in the world rather than as one that reconciles competing interests. Yes, but ultimately Marx himself sees the state in that role, but through a very different strategy. What is less convincing, however, is the expectation that particulars will only be one day be eradicated. What is missing, and that's a perpetual problem for Marxism as well as capitalism. Particular interests never go away. What is missing in any sense that the state itself as well as the side through which a diverse competing interests to secure their own advantage. I mean, it is not absent. Obviously, whole Marxist critique is based on that idea and to have overcome it, but they thought they would be able to overcome through their strategy. So in that sense, they were probably wrong. To gain an appreciation of these dimensions, we need to turn to Hume. Okay. Now, let's do Hume theory next time. Okay. That's a good place to stop. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك وصلى الله تعالى على خير خلق محمد وآله وصحبه أزواجه وذريته أجمعين برحمتك